Running a business can be exhausting. Building your website shouldn't be. With Wix, you can express your ideas, give direction, then leave the heavy lifting to AI, from site creation to branded content and images. Have fun with the details. Customize what you want the way you want, and manage your whole business from a centralized dashboard with expert AI tools. Build, scale, and enjoy the incredible results. You can do it all yourself on Wix.
Have you ever had one of those conversations where you just click? Where after a few minutes you're thinking, did I just make a new best friend? Those moments are so rare, aren't they? And they seem to get even rarer as we get older. You know what I miss most about my wild party days? It's not the hangovers, that's for sure. It's those deep, soul-bearing chats that I'd have with total strangers at 5 a.m., sponsored by MDMA and a bathroom floor. In those situations, suddenly everyone's a philosopher, right? Just kidding. I don't actually miss those days at all. Besides, when the connection is manufactured by drugs, at least those kind, it's usually never to be seen again after sunrise. Real life is a whole different ballgame. People are scared to wade out of the shallow end. You have to coax them in, show them it's safe to open up. I learned something pretty young. You don't have to inherit your parents' or grandparents' patterns. You can change them. So as I've gotten older and more frustrated with the lack of depth in some conversations, I decided to be the change maker. I'm going to be the one that makes the effort. But here's the kicker. You can't go into it with expectations. That's just setting yourself up for disappointment. And let's be real, some people might have actually lost the ability to go deep. But I think most people just need the opportunity, or maybe a guide. They can do it, they want to do it, but they don't want to go it alone. You know what I've learned since having toddlers? The best way to get anyone to try something new is to show them that it's safe. Be the one to take that first step. Now imagine if you could create those deep connections on demand. Not just in those rare, perfect moments, but in your everyday life. At work, with your partner, even with the cashier at your local grocery store, unless that sounds horrible. Or maybe it sounds too good to be true. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to explore the art and science of becoming a super communicator, someone who can connect with anyone, anytime, anywhere. Think about it. How many times have you walked away from a conversation feeling misunderstood? Or worse, feeling like you've completely missed the mark in understanding someone else? It's frustrating, right? And it can have real consequences. Missed opportunities, strained relationships, even big mistakes at work. But what if I told you there's a method to this madness? That there are actually hidden layers to every conversation we have. And once you learn to recognize them, you can navigate any interaction with confidence and skill. And that's where our guest today comes in. Charles Duhigg is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter and the author of The Power of Habit, which spent over 60 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. His latest book, Supercommunicators, is all about unlocking the secrets of truly effective communication. Charles has spent years researching what makes conversations work. He's talked to CIA officers about how they recruit reluctant foreign agents. He sat in on jury deliberations to see how one person can sway a divided room. He's even delved into the writer's room of The Big Bang Theory to understand how they craft dialogue that resonates with millions. And what he's discovered is pretty mind-blowing. Apparently, whenever we speak, we're actually participating in 3 conversations at once. We'll get into that. And most of us are only aware of one. But super communicators, they're tuned into all 3 all the time. So today he's going to break down these 3 layers for us. We're talking practical, actionable tips here. By the end of this episode, you're going to have tools to transform your communication skills, whether you're trying to nail that big presentation at work, deepen your relationships with your partner, or even just make meaningful connections in your day-to-day life. So get ready. We will learn the surprising questions that go beyond small talk and lead to profound, meaningful conversations. How to shift your conversational focus from surface-level facts to emotional truths to deepen bonds with others. And the secret you can steal from top salespeople to align with people emotionally. Can we talk about back-to-school chaos for a second? The kids are getting back into routines, everyone's schedules are crazy, and suddenly you're supposed to have dinner on the table every night like some kind of magician. But want to know what I figured out? Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, which is why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's a huge lifesaver on those busy weeknights. I personally love their smart cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to my tastes and needs. Plus, I love the kids' snack section where I get these really easy snacks to just keep in the car or throw in our to-go bags or lunch boxes for those of you who need them. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. They only source high-quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry trusted brands like Oatly and Vital Farms. The time that I have gotten back has been incredible. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE. I've hired a lot of people over the years, and I can tell you the biggest mistake that most business owners make. They think posting a job and waiting is a strategy, but it is not. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you stand out and hire fast. With Sponsored Jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so that you can reach the people you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. One of the things that I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring so fast because the best candidates are already there, actively looking. Plus, with Indeed Sponsored Jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's be real about something. Workplace stress is not just part of the job anymore. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal, and it is not sustainable. I used to think that grinding through stress was some kind of badge of honor. Push harder, sleep less, ignore what your body was telling you. And it nearly broke me when I was working for startups. And look, maybe that voice in your head telling you to make a change is right. Maybe you do need to quit your job or completely flip your life. But whether you're making big moves or just trying to survive your current situation, you need tools to handle it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without the guilt, how to trust your intuition instead of second-guessing yourself constantly, how to make better decisions from a place of clarity instead of chaos. And BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists. They've got a 4.9 rating from 1.7 million reviews because it actually works. You can talk to someone from anywhere, and you can switch therapists anytime if it's not the right fit. A vacation won't fix chronic stress, but the right support can help you navigate whatever comes next. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. My listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove.
You know where your business would be without you. Imagine where it could go with more of you. Well, with Wix, you can create a website with more of your vision, your voice, your expertise. Wix gives you the freedom to truly own your brand and do it on your own, with full customization and advanced AI tools that help turn your ideas into reality. Grow your business into your online brand. Because without you, your business is just business as usual. Go to Wix.com.
Communication isn't just about coordinating with others. Communication is often what makes us happy. So there was a study done named the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And for about 80 years, they have followed around thousands of people. And eventually, what they come up with is there's actually only one thing that predicts if someone's going to be happy and healthy and successful at age 65. And that's having a handful of close relationships at age 45. That doesn't mean that I'm seeing them every day. That doesn't mean I'm talking to them every week. That might mean I talk to someone every 6 months. But when we talk to each other, we actually set aside like an hour and a half just to catch up, to get to know like what's going on in each other's lives, to just kind of like, chew the fat on like how we see the world and what we make of the world. And we feel connected to each other. And that sense of connection creates a sense of goodness, a sense of wholeness, of healthiness. And what we know is that if you do that, you live more years.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So, what inspired you to write a book about the secret language of connection?
Well, it actually started because I got into this bad pattern with my wife. When I started working on Supercommunicators, preceding it, my wife and I have been married for about 20 years. And I got into this pattern, which I think is probably familiar to a number of people who are listening, which is I would come home from work and I would start to, talking about my day and complaining about, my boss doesn't understand me and my coworkers don't appreciate me. And my wife very, very reasonably would give me some good advice. She would say something like, why don't you take your boss out to lunch and you guys can get to know each other a little bit better? And instead of being able to hear the good advice she was giving me, I would get even more upset. And I would say, why aren't you supporting me? And you're supposed to be on my side and you should be outraged on my behalf. And this is a pattern that I assume you've had with your partners. I think everyone has had this, right? And so I went to experts and I asked them, why is this happening? Like, what's going on that causes us to not be able to connect with each other? And they said, well, it's interesting you came and you asked us now because we're actually living through this golden age of understanding communication and conversation. And they said, one of the things that we've learned is when you're having a discussion, you assume that discussion is about one thing, right? It's about like my day or, the kids' grades or where we should go on vacation. But actually, every discussion is made up of many different kinds of conversations. And in general, those kinds of conversations, they all tend to fall into one of three buckets. There's these practical conversations where we're talking about making plans or solving problems together. But then there's also emotional conversations where I might tell you what I'm feeling, and I don't want you to solve my feelings. I want you to empathize and I want you to relate. And then there's social conversations, which is about how we relate to each other and how we relate to society and the social identities that are important to us. And they said, what we've discovered is if people are having different kinds of conversations at the same moment, they have trouble hearing each other. All three of those kinds of conversations, they're all totally legitimate. But if I'm having an emotional conversation because I come home from work and I'm talking about how my boss doesn't understand me, and my wife replies with a practical conversation, she gives me advice, then we can't really hear each other. Even more than that, we tend to make it impossible for us to connect. And that's really frustrating. And this has become known within psychology as the matching principle, that having the same kind of conversation at the same moment is critical to real communication and connection.
I love the way that's framed. I think I have understood part of this on a level. I'm going to thank Instagram. Man, sometimes I'll get a reel and it's just like the best thing my husband and I do is ask people, do you need me to listen or do you need me to solve or whatever? And I've actually gotten a lot of good wisdom from that. But the way you break this up of practical, emotional, and social, that takes it to another level because I think that first tip only really feels like it applies with that emotional need where it's like, no, I need to let this off of my chest and feel heard and understood and just hold me. And so with the other types, or even with all of them, but bringing those into the conversation, how do we become more adept at matching those conversation styles?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing is we can sometimes just ask, right? In schools, they teach teachers that if a student comes up and they want to have a serious conversation, or really any kind of meaningful conversation, the teacher is well served by asking at the beginning of the conversation, okay, so do you want me to help you do you want me to hug you or do you want me to hear you? Right? Which of course are the like three kinds of conversations, the practical, the emotional, and the social. So we can always ask, like, and that's what my wife does now, right? She says, like, do you want me to help you solve this problem, or do you just need to complain and vent and get it off your chest? But sometimes asking in that way is awkward or it's not practical, particularly if you're at work, right? You don't want to ask someone, do you want me to help you or hug you at work? So in that setting, one of the best things that we can do, and this is something that consistent super communicators do a lot of, is we can ask questions. And there are some questions that are more powerful than others. And within psychology, again, these are known as deep questions. And a deep question is something that asks about our values or our beliefs or our experiences. And that can sound a little bit intimidating, right? But it's actually as simple as if you meet someone who, say, is a doctor, instead of asking them, where do you practice medicine? If we ask them, oh, what made you decide to go to medical school? Or what do you like about being a doctor? What we're doing there is we're asking them about their experiences. We're asking them about their values. We're inviting them to say something more real and meaningful to us. And then we can reciprocate. So one of the first lessons that we should learn, in addition to trying to figure out what kind of conversation is going on and try and match each other, is let's ask deep questions, because those deep questions are going to give us a sense of what kind of mindset the person is in, what matters to them, and how to connect with them.
In the last couple of years, I moved from Los Angeles to Big Bear. So now I'm in a small town, and I was surrounded by all these entrepreneurs going to WeWork every day. And I had a really difficult time coming here and just feeling like the level of conversation had shifted. And in my mind, it really had downgraded. All of a sudden, I was having a lot of toddler snack conversations. I was a new mom. And instead of like, what lights your soul on fire? What's your next marketing move? And I really felt down about this for about a year and a half. And then I realized, what kind of questions am I asking people? I'm setting the stage for surface level conversations. It might not be these deep marketing strategies that I love to geek out on, but everyone has a level of depth, even if they're not used to accessing it, even if they're not used to having these good conversations. And so I started to really try to make it my mission to ask those deeper conversations or those deeper questions. But it's so easy to kind of just fall into our default patterning of even doing the things that I hate when other people do to me. How do you get yourself in the mindset of like, okay, remember, let's go deeper than the surface of this ocean?
I think the key is, instead of asking people about the facts of their lives, which is what we normally do, ask them how they feel about their lives, right? So like when you meet another new mom, how old are your kids now?
1 and 3.
1 and 3. Okay, so you're like in it, right? You're in the middle of it. When you meet another new mom at the playground, what's the first thing that is easiest for you to ask?
Hey, how are you? Right. How you feel? Are you in fight or flight today? Do you need a hug?
Yeah. Those are great deep questions. Those are fantastic deep questions. Oftentimes people will be like, oh, where do you live? What preschool does your kid go to? Do you know so-and-so? Those are asking about the facts of someone's life. And facts are oftentimes a dead end, right? Because it's one word answer. It's like, oh, my kid goes to Montessori, right? Oh, like he has a brother. So I think when we ask questions like the one you asked, like, how are you doing? Or even more so, like, is he enjoying the preschool? Like, are you finding like, was it hard for you to find preschool? Do you feel like that preschool is like a great place? Do you like it? When I'm asking them how they feel about their lives instead of the facts about their lives, that's when I'm inviting them to say something meaningful. And what's important is to recognize the difference between inviting someone to say something meaningful and mandating that they say something meaningful. So like actually a question like, are you in fight or flight right now? That might actually feel like a mandate to someone, right? They're like, I don't really want to get into that with this person that I just met. But a question that is more inviting would be like, I find myself like some days are better than other days. How's your day going today? Is this a good day or not such a good day? Then you're sort of giving someone an invitation where they can say like, yeah, today's not such a good day. Like this is a tough one. Or if they don't want to go there, if they just want to like sit there and kind of zen out, they can say like, oh, it's a great day. Thanks so much. So the difference between an invitation and a mandate is really, really useful to think about.
It's so funny that that's the example that you brought up. We are planning on homeschooling, but fingers crossed. I don't know what that stage is going to be like, but there's a little preschool here, and we decided to have him go 2 half days a week just for the socialization, to have some fun, see how it goes. And it just started yesterday, and I have like 19 mixed feelings about it. I don't know if it's going to last longer than this week.
Right.
And so you're giving me these examples, and I'm like, I have an answer for you, Charles. Like,
well, and that's the thing, is that if you bumped into someone in the park and they said, "What's the name of the preschool where he's going?"
I'm not going to say this on the podcast.
Oh, okay. Well, they're like, if they said like, where, like, oh, what preschool is your kid going to? You would have a one-word answer. But if they asked like, how do you feel about preschool? Like, do you think it's like the right choice for him? Like, is it going well? Then you would have a lot more to say. And that's a much better way to invite someone to have a robust conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And what I like about it is when you come at a conversation this way, it sort of reframes it. And I think sometimes I have noticed often when people go deep quickly, it's not in curiosity, it's because they're unloading something. They need to take it somewhere. I've been guilty of that before, where I'm like, oh, I don't know, we're only 13 seconds in and I'm talking about government corruption already. Not the best way to make friends. But but it reminds me of this idea of like the first intention is connection, is synchronization. And you talk about this concept of neurological synchronization, and it's fascinating. Can you break that down in layman's terms for us?
Yeah. So when you're in a conversation with someone, well, let me preface this by saying, if you think about it, communication is Homo sapiens' superpower, right? The reason we have succeeded as a species so well is because we can communicate with each other. And that's allowed us to build families and villages and tribes and cities and aircraft carriers and video games. And without communication, we would be much worse off. And so as a result, because communication is so valuable, our brains have evolved to be really good at communication. In fact, they've evolved to try and encourage communication. And one of the ways that this happens is that when you're in a real conversation with someone, when you're in a meaningful conversation like this one, even if you are separated by hundreds or thousands of miles, your bodies will start to match each other. So our breath patterns during this conversation have started to become similar without either of us realizing it. Our heart rates have started to become similar. Even though we're sitting in different rooms and we have different lighting around us, our pupils are likely dilating at the same rate. And even more importantly, inside our brains, if we could see our neural activity, what we would see is that you and I are thinking more and more alike. The neural activity within our brains is starting to look more and more similar. And that makes sense when you think about it, because if I describe an emotion to you, you actually experience that emotion a little bit. Or if I tell you about an idea that I had, you experience that idea. So it would make sense that our brains would start to look similar. And this similarity, what's known within neuroscience as neural entrainment, is at the core of communication. When we are communicating with each other, the more and more similar our brains become, the more and more we become connected neurologically, the better we can understand each other. Also, the more that we will like each other and trust each other and want to spend time with each other. But most importantly, the better we understand each other. And that's why these three kinds of conversations are so important, is because if I'm having an emotional conversation, I'm using the amygdala, the deep interior structure of my brain, and you're having a practical conversation, you're using your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's behind the forehead, it's very hard for our thoughts to become similar. It's very hard for us to become entrained because we're literally using different parts of our brain. So when you say something emotional and I lean in and say, oh, tell me how that made you feel. Or I say, oh, I understand feeling that way. I felt the same way a week ago when this happened to me. What I'm doing there is I'm not only just matching the tone and the mindset and the topic of conversation, I'm also matching the part of your brain that you're using with the part of the brain I'm using. And that's going to help us become entrained. That's also why a good conversation feels so wonderful. Our brains want to encourage this entrainment. Our brains know that this is important for socialization. And so when we become entrained with another person, it actually releases neurotransmitters associated with a reward sensation. That's why you feel so good after a great conversation, is because it's something that's actually important.
I'm sure everyone's experienced it where you meet someone and you just click. You feel that entrainment immediately. And then there's other conversations where it feels like a lot more work. But then there's people. I can think of 3 off the top of my head that are so good at that. They just, I watch them have conversations with everybody else and I'm like, man, you're so good at just matching that, drawing that in. Is that what we should practice if we want to be those types of people? It's just to see how we can match that tone and energy level?
I mean, that's part of it. Yeah. So this kind of gets to what a super communicator is. And the thing is, all of us are super communicators at one point or another. And there's a good test to figure out when you're a super communicator and who the super communicators are in your life. And I'll do it with you. If you came home from work and it had been a long and hard day and you wanted to call someone who you know would make you feel better, like as soon as you talk to them, you know that it would just like improve your day. Do you know who you would call? Like, does that person pop into your mind?
Yes.
Yeah. So who is it for you?
My best friend in Texas.
Okay. So your best friend in Texas is a super communicator for you. And you're probably a super communicator right back to her. And what does she do when you're talking to her that makes you feel better?
She knows if it's something like, she won't match with solving right away. First, there's always that is so frustrating. So there's the meeting of the emotions there and just accepting them without talking me out of it. But then what I love about her is we both study the same things, like the topics of this podcast, where we're both constantly learning. And so the depths of our conversation can go so deep. And she offers real advice that's helpful, where I feel like, this is sad to say, but sometimes the more you learn, the more difficult it is to find people that are helpful, because you always feel like you know a little bit more than they do. Maybe that's the ego. But anyways, I feel like we can just talk for hours and always be learning from each other.
And it sounds like she probably asked deep questions. She's probably sort of asking the questions that draw out how you feel about things, rather than the facts of just what happened. What do you make of it? Like, what does it mean to you? And my guess is that she's also proving to you that she's listening. She's asking follow-up questions. She's repeating back what you say. She's showing to you that she's paying close attention and thinking about what you're saying. Is that fair?
Definitely.
So what's interesting is there are some people who can be consistent super communicators, right? The thing that you have with your friend in Texas, they can have with anyone. And it's not because they were born with something special. It's not because they're more charismatic or more of an extrovert. It's because they've recognized that what happens when you talk to your friend and she talks back to you is that you guys are using a series of skills. You might not think of them as skills. You might even not recognize that you're doing something special, but you're doing something special, a set of skills that you've practiced with your friend. And super communicators, consistent super communicators, have recognized I can use those skills with anyone, right? The same way that like I can learn to read by reading comic books, I can use that same skill to read a cookbook. The skills that you have practiced with your friends are skills you can use on strangers, on coworkers, on people that in your community. And when you do, they will feel closer to you. They will feel close to you the same way that your friend feels close to you. You know, when I first started reporting super communicators and working on it, I thought that I would find that people who were good at communication had always been good at communication. But it turns out that the people who are best at this, the consistent super communicators, if you ask them, they say things like, no, like when I was in high school, I had real trouble making friends. And so I had to really study how kids talk to each other. Or that, you know, when I was young, my parents got divorced and I had to be the peacemaker between them. People who are super communicators not because they're born with like the gift of gab, but because they've had to think about communication just a little bit more. And that thinking about communication helps them recognize the skills that all of us carry within ourselves that we can use with anyone. Anyone can become a super communicator. Anyone who's listening can become a super communicator. It's just a matter of recognizing a handful of skills and then practicing them until they become habits.
I'm going to have to send this episode to my friend because these are 15 minutes of fame here, but that fits. She had told me that she barely spoke until she was 3, was always kind of caught in her parents' crossfire and didn't really feel seen. And so I look at her now, and it's funny, we'll be in an Uber in Mexico and she will get out and she'll look so touched by the conversation she just had because she chose the front seat of this cab driver and she knows how many kids they have and this life story. And I'm just like, how do you even have the curiosity? By the time I'm in an Uber, I'm like, just leave me alone. So it's easy to look at other people and think, they have this natural thing that I will never have, but they just started learning for survival earlier than we did. And oftentimes the stakes were higher because it was for survival. Whereas later on, it's more like, okay, I'm at a party. I could go home. I don't even need this here. Like
exactly. I don't have, and the thing that's important, you mentioned getting in that Uber, nobody has to have a conversation. Like no one should feel like they're obligated to have a conversation. Sometimes we get in the Uber and we just want to check our email. Like we want to do Wordle, right? We don't want to have a conversation with the driver. But the point of writing the book Supercommunicators is so that when people do want to have a conversation, they have the tools and the skills to make that conversation go well. So that when we decide, like, I do want to connect with this person, or I do want to connect with this Uber driver, like I want to have a real conversation, that we know how to do that. And you're right, some people learn it because they have to survive. But that doesn't mean that we have to have our back pushed up against the wall to get good at this. Sometimes it's just a matter of someone pointing out what the skills are and then practicing them a little bit, and then they start to feel very natural.
When people hear this idea, I know it's easy to think, well, okay, yeah, that'll make you really likable, but it just, and I'm speaking from my own past self of I remember like the courses I'd learn about like how to listen better. It's like, okay, I think I'm good at listening, but at the same time, like, where's that going to get me type thing? Like, what's this really, how can this serve my career or whatever? What's in it for me is how people's brains tend to work with if they're going to invest in a new understanding. But it's not just about listening or being likable. You share that these people that you call high centrality participants, they're also effective, but more effective at influencing others. How so?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For the same reason that when your friend gives you a piece of advice, you tend to listen to it a little bit more closely, right? High centrality participants or super communicators, they tend to help us understand what's going on. And so the way that they frame things is very influential, right? It's interesting because in a lot of studies that have been done of these folks, what they have not found is that they have the best ideas. Like there is no evidence that like a super communicator has better ideas than anyone else. But if you ask people who are in meetings with them, they will tell you that they had great ideas. And the reason why is because they tend to repeat other people's ideas in a way that's easier for everyone else to hear, right? So my job isn't necessarily to come up with a solution. My job is to listen to everyone offering solutions and pick one and explain it to everyone else in a way that you can understand it. And this gets to something important about communication, which is communication isn't just about coordinating with others. Communication is often what makes us happy. So there was a study done named the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And for about 80 years, they have followed around thousands of people. They had this basic question, which was, what are the things that make you successful, healthy, and happy at age 65? And so they go and they test a bunch of things, and they follow people for decades. And eventually what they come up with is there's actually only one thing that predicts if someone's going to be happy and healthy and successful at age 65. And that's having a handful of close relationships at age 45. Because if I have a handful of close relationships at age 45, that doesn't mean that I'm seeing them every day. That doesn't mean I'm talking to them every week. That might mean I talk to someone every 6 months. But when we talk to each other, we actually set aside like an hour and a half just to catch up, to get to know like what's going on in each other's lives, to just kind of like, chew the fat on like how we see the world and what we make of the world. And we feel connected to each other. And that sense of connection creates a sense of goodness, a sense of wholeness, of healthiness. And what we know is that if you do that, you actually live longer, you live more years, right? The Surgeon General has said that Being lonely is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And 15 cigarettes a day is like a lot of cigarettes, right? Like that's like a good number of cigarettes. When we connect with other people, we tend to make ourselves healthier and happier, but also to make ourselves more successful, however you define success, because oftentimes other people tell us about opportunities that we didn't know about ourselves. So one of the best things that we can do if we want to preserve our health and our happiness and our success is to have conversations with other people, to make time for this and really indulge in those relationships with the people that we care about and sustain them, not let them fall out of touch.
It reminds me of salespeople. Good salespeople actually don't talk a lot. They ask a lot of questions. And it's
Yeah.
funny. I've looked back at conversations that I've been sold to, and I'm like, wait, okay, the only reason that felt like such a good fit, I actually didn't heard him say 19 sentences and I talked for an hour and a half. But there's something about like, you want to know, is this right for me? And so you spill out everything, all the details. And the more questions they ask, then I just assume they're taking stock of all of it and being like, okay, good fit, good fit. And so if they still pitch it to me after I've told them my whole life story, then it's got to be perfect. And so it's less about them selling themselves and more about them, like me feeling like I'm an open book. And then, okay, you see me. Now what do you think about this? Now is this right for me? And in the same way, you can use those concepts to connect with people because it's like, okay, you see me and you're not running or you're not judging or you're meeting me where I am or whatever it is. And so, yeah, salespeople and coaches are so great at asking questions to get you to kind of open up and come to your own conclusions. And then you made the conclusion. You weren't sold on it.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that they're doing is they're often matching you, right? If someone comes in and they say, well, I need a new car to get to work. And they start asking them questions like, what do you like about car? Like, what kind of cars make you happy? Like, when do you find you're happiest driving? And pretty quickly it comes out that like, actually, sure, I need a car to get to work. But what I really want is I want a car that I think like, tells me that I'm successful or tells me that I'm living an adventurous lifestyle or we have kids now and I need a bigger car, but I don't want to be like one of those minivan dads, And once someone hears that, once they're able to match me and we're not having a practical conversation, it's not about, what gets the best MPG. It's about how do you feel about this car? Then they can say, okay, look, I think I understand a lot about like, you're looking for a car that says something to you. Now, do you mind if I talk to you about some practical things? Because like we should talk about miles per gallon and we should talk about price. At that moment, I am willing to move from the emotional to the practical with that person, right? They're inviting me. They've matched me. We've become aligned. And when they move from emotional to practical, I'm right there with them. Because every conversation we have has all three of those kinds of conversations, right? We move from emotional to practical to social back to emotional. What matters is that we do make that movement together because then we stay aligned.
I feel like your brain has already entrained with me. I just said to my husband 2 days ago, I might be ready to be a minivan mom.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a bad thing.
Something about sliding those doors open seems like such a luxury after crawling over all the car seats and the snacks.
Yeah. And they're easier to clean too.
Yeah, sold. Sending my husband this recording. You mentioned this story in your book that I just found so fascinating is about the case of Leroy Reed and how the jury managed to challenge the legal guidelines. Can you explain that story and why it's helpful here?
Yeah, and there's a bunch of stories in the book. I mean, one of the reasons that I love to write books like Supercommunicators is to tell stories, and there's stories of a CIA officer trying to recruit an overseas spy and how NASA looks for astronauts with emotional intelligence by paying attention to how they laugh. But that story you mentioned about Leroy Reed is a great one. And it's kind of this question of, so that Leroy Reed was a guy in the 1990s who was arrested in Wisconsin. He was an ex-con who had bought a gun. And it's illegal to own a gun if you're an ex-convict in Minnesota. Now, the question that came up during his trial was, did Leroy Reed know that it was illegal? Like, did he know he was breaking the law? And it turns out that the reason he had bought this gun was because he had been trying to get a job and he couldn't get anyone to hire him. And he saw on the back of a magazine an ad that said if he sent in $20, they would give him instructions on how to become a private investigator. So he sends in his $20 and he gets a tin badge in the mail and these instructions. And the instructions say things like, go for a run every morning and go have a gun. So Leroy Reed, he just follows the instructions because he's not very smart. And then he's cognitively disabled. And he goes and he buys a gun and he gets the box that the gun has come in and he never touches the gun. He takes the box home, he puts it up on a shelf in his closet, and then he never touches it again. And the only reason that the cops even knew that he had bought a gun is because one day he was hanging out in front of the courthouse hoping that someone would hire him to solve a crime. And a cop asked him if he had any ID. And the only ID that Leroy had was the bill of sale, the receipt from when he had bought the gun. And he showed it to the cop and the cop said, well, do you have a criminal record? And Leroy had said yes. And so they arrested him. So now he's on trial to figure out if he's going to go to jail. And it's one of these things where it's clear that he has actually broken the law, right? The law is very clear. If you are an ex-convict and you own a gun, you have broken the law. And he is an ex-convict and he has owned a gun. But the question for the jury is it fair? Should they just follow the law or should they follow their own conscience? And they're having real trouble discussing this. They're having real trouble hearing each other because some people would say look, he's clearly guilty. He should go to jail. And other people would say, yeah, but is he really guilty? Does it seem fair that he's guilty? And they would say fairness is not an issue. The judge didn't ask us. The judge asked us to apply the law, and they're fighting with each other and they can't hear each other until this one guy named John Boley, who's a supercommunicator, he kind of comes into the conversation. What he says is he understands that he has to match each side. So there's this one group that's having a practical conversation, right? They're talking about what does the law say? And then there's another group that's having essentially a social conversation. They're talking about what's justice. And they can't hear each other because they're having different conversations. So what John Boley does is he comes in and he helps translate between them. And he says to the practical folks, he says, look, I understand that upholding the law is very important to you. Tell me why. What does this law mean to you? Why is it so important? And one guy says, look, even if Leroy Reed didn't mean to break the law, we have law. Without laws, we have anarchy, right? We have to enforce the laws, even if it doesn't seem fair, because otherwise society will fall apart. And John Boley says, well, one of the things I hear you saying is not just that this law is important, but that you want things that increase public safety. You want things that help make us more safe. And the guy says, yeah. And he says, well, the thing that occurs to me is I kind of want to send a message to the district attorney that rather than bringing us these cases of someone like Leroy Reed, who's really not going to pose a threat, you should be finding and arresting the murderers and the rapists. And actually, if we let Leroy Reed free, it would send a message that you should take public safety more seriously, Mr. District Attorney. And then for the other group, he does the same thing. He helps them understand that even though they're interested in justice and fairness, that they have to find a way within the context of how the law is written to make an exception. And once he does that, the jury comes together and they have a unanimous verdict. But it's only because one person could see that there were two different kinds of conversations were happening and could help them hear each other that everything comes to a good end. And Leroy Reed actually ended up going free.
I just love everything about that story. I feel like I could read it over and over again and be better at life. But one thing I find, especially as an empath, and I know that there's a lot of people in my audience that relate to that, just being able to, just being a little bit more sensitive to the energies of people. And especially since, I don't know, there's just been a lot of division the last 4 years. I find myself sometimes nervous to go deep because I don't want to go in certain directions. I don't want to be there in people's discomfort. But one of the things that you share about that I think could be really helpful is preparing for conversational discomfort and not saying that we're going to go to a 3-year-old birthday party and immediately ask who you're voting for. But but sometimes it just leads places. Like, people are uncomfortable about different things. Some people are uncomfortable as soon as somebody shows emotion. Some people are uncomfortable if it's religion or politics or this. So what are your tips in that department?
Well, let me ask you, when the last time you had a conversation like this, last time you had a conversation where you sort of felt that like, I'm not sure I want to go there, right? Do I really want to talk about this? Tell me about what happened. Like, what did that feel like to you? Do you remember? Is there one instance
It
that stands
happens
out
like
in your mind?
17 times a day, but mine is probably different. I have very controversial views, and I study a lot of things. So I just have very strong opinions about things. Like, currently, the preschool thing, I'm super stressed out about the food. Like, they are, and I just was talking to another parent, and I wanted to say, like, I just wish the food was organic. They gave them cereal. I tried to feed him before. Like, those are the things going on in my mind. So for me, a lot of the times I feel like I'm staying on the surface level because I don't want to accidentally offend people, because who knows, maybe that person is eating no organic food. I don't know. I just have a lot, like, we live very differently from people. And so I feel it pretty often, but I'm probably the one bringing the discomfort.
Well, what if instead of like leading with an opinion, what if you led with a question, and you're talking to that other parent and you say, I've been trying to at home we try and eat organic, and I've been thinking about the schools, like the school's food and what the food they're using. Is that something that, like, you guys think about? Has it been an issue or a concern for you? Right. At that point, what you're doing is you're inviting them. I mean, they might say, no, we're fine. We don't care what our kid eats. Right. Or, like, it seems like it's pretty good food. In which case, like, okay, this isn't something necessarily where you and I vibe. Right. But instead of launching into your own kind of perspective, if you're asking them how they see the world, they might also say, yeah, this is something I've been thinking about too. Like, we try and eat healthy at home, and then he comes to school and he eats less healthy, and I'm worried about that. And so I think asking a question in those situations. Now there are some conversations where going into them, we know that they're going to be uncomfortable, right? Sometimes we have to have hard conversations with the people we love. Sometimes we have to have hard conversations with coworkers. Sometimes we go to Thanksgiving and crazy Uncle Gary is at the table and he thinks that lizard people run the world. And, so what do we do in those situations? Well, what's really important is, first of all, it really helps a lot to acknowledge at the outset that this conversation could be uncomfortable. And that's a matter of just saying, like, I need to talk to you about this thing. And I know this is going to be a hard conversation, and I might say the wrong thing, right? Like, in the gap between my brain and my lips, it might get all messed up and I say something that sounds offensive, or and I hope you will forgive me. That's not what I intend. And I want you to know that if you say the wrong thing, I promise I'm going to forgive you, right? Then we're lowering the temperature. Then the question becomes, what is the goal of that conversation? And if your goal is, I want to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong, or I want to convince you that you should care about organic food when it's clear you don't care about organic food, you're probably going to fail. In fact, you're almost certainly going to fail, right? The goal of a conversation is not to convince someone else of something. It's not to convince you that you should like me, or that I'm smart, or that I'm right and you're wrong. The goal of a conversation is simply to understand what the other person is saying and to speak in a way that they can understand you. And so in a situation like that, instead of saying, like, I think it's terrible, the food they're serving our kids, when you ask, like, how do you think about organic food? And if someone says, like, actually, I don't think it's a big deal, like, it's not something that, like, matters to me. Your goal is not to convince them that they're wrong. Your goal is to understand why they feel that way. Because honestly, they might have some good arguments, right? They might have some good points. And so I think that those conversations become a lot easier when we go into them with the right goal and the right approach.
Super helpful. And I actually just did that in an intro of a podcast, because I was looking back and I was like, I get really opinionated about ADHD medication and I want to make sure nobody thinks I'm judging them. So that's a really good tip, because it helps me at least, because we all have these limiting beliefs or these things from childhood, and there's certain times where I'm like, maybe I'm too opinionated. Maybe people aren't going to like me. But if you just go in and say, like, just so you know, anything I say isn't a judgment, blah, 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 it helps you to be more open and not so guarded in conversations, which is a great way to connect. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
of all of the studies and strategies and stories that you share in the book, what do you think is the single most important insight that readers should take away to become super communicators?
I think the biggest insight is to show the person that you want to connect with them, right? Take laughter. 80, according to studies, 80% of the time when we laugh, it is not in response to something funny, right? We laugh in conversations all the time. And it's not because the other person has told a joke. We laugh because we want to show that person that we want to connect with them. And when they laugh back, which is like the most natural response, they're showing us that they want to connect with us in return. When we show people that we want to connect with them, when we show them that we want to understand them, when we show people that I see that you're feeling something emotional and I'm going to lean into those emotions, I'm going to share with you something emotional about myself. When we show people that we want to connect with them, then that gets us most of the way there. Because once we know someone wants to connect, once they invite us to connect, it makes it a lot easier for us to accept that invitation.
Well, if people are as intrigued as I am about all of these concepts and all of the amazing stories that help just remember those concepts, because it's so much easier to grasp with a good story, where's the best place for people to connect with you and find your book?
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon or your local bookstore. Independent bookstores are a wonderful place to buy them. It's Supercommunicators. I wrote another book called The Power of Habit that's also there. If you want to find me, my website is charlesduhigg.com, or if you just Google Supercommunicators or Power of Habit, I'll come up.
All the links for this episode are at mindlove.com/360. So your challenge this week is to show your people that you want to connect with them, whether that's someone close to you, whether it's a new level of conversation with your partner or even your mom, or it's starting conversations with strangers in elevators. I don't know. How do you want to practice? I personally am going to go beyond my comfort zone. There's certain situations where I just kind of want to be in my bubble, and I think I can challenge myself to step outside of that, to see what the universe has for me if I just open up a little bit. So let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. There's so many exciting things that I've been putting out lately. Freebies in my email list. So if you're not on the Morning Mind Love, I've been sending out meditations, workbooks, checklists, you name it. Plus, we recently had a mind-blowing masterclass, and right now, the doors are open for soul strength activation. I am only opening up these doors twice a year, and I might take a break at the beginning of next year, so this might be your last chance for a while. So if you have questions, if you want to hop on a call, if you want to suss this out and see if it's for you, send me a DM that just says SSA, and I'll open up the convo. And if we need to hop on a call, I would absolutely love to show you that I want to connect with you. You see what I did there? Also, we're down to the wire with our retreat. As of recording this, there's only 2 spots left, and one of them is one of the master bedrooms, which is one of the most epic rooms in the whole house. This is going to be so incredible, you guys. You should see my little gift bags. You should see the daily itinerary. If you're not on social, that's where I've been sharing sneak peeks into all of this. So if you want to chat about this, just DM me a retreat. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.
Hi, welcome to IKEA.
Can you turn back time? I'm sending my baby to college.
We don't do time travel, but we can make sure you find affordable, stylish options they'll love.
Aww.
Also, visit our website to see how verified college students with an IKEA family account can receive a one-time use 15% off coupon.
Double
Offer in September 30th, 2025. Valid ID required. Discount apply proportionally across items purchased as shown on receipt. See IKEA-USA.com/ready for complete terms.
You set the gold standard for your business. Your website should do the same. Wix puts you at the helm so you can enjoy the creative freedom of designing your site just the way you want. Want someone to bounce your ideas off? Talk with AI to create a beautiful site together. Whatever your business, manage it from one place and tie it all together with a personalized domain name. Gear up for success with a brand that says you best. You can do it yourself on Wix.